now.
Okay.
Our title is Daniel Deronda, Zionism and Canaanism, but I'm going to have to also change the description before we share this.
Okay, definitely. Well, I'm looking anyway, and it hasn't popped up. I just refreshed and ready to see if it's coming.
Okay, we do have 100 subscribers there.
That's actually really good. I think it's gone up since the last time I remember looking at your page or channel.
Yeah, and this is not for kids. This video is definitely not for kids.
As far as I'm concerned, nothing on YouTube is supposed to be for anybody under the age of 13 because you're supposed to be logging in to watch. So yes, obviously it's for everybody that's over 13 and above with an interest in the topic.
Okay, we talk about George Eliot's novel, Daniel Deronda, and its influence on Zionism. Also about Canaanism.
I'm so interested to hear you talk about this topic because so many people think that everybody that's into Zionism or following the Canaanite movement is super religious, but that's just not the case at all, is it?
No, it's not. I mean, that doesn't mean that people can't be spiritual.
No, I'm not saying people can't be spiritual, but I feel like there's this misconception that if you belong to a certain movement, you must be very, I don't know, but I'll let you are the expert on this topic. So
I haven't changed. I just got tagged in a post, but I haven't yet changed the description.
Whoopsie. Okay. I thought we got it already.
No.
Because I saw it say Daniel Deronda. It looks like it's updated on my end.
Okay.
Let me check again.
I'm working on the tags. So Canaanism, Israel, and
it's correct here.
Okay.
Everything's correct. It says Daniel Deronda, Zionism, and I guess you guys say Canaanism because I was always that's the correct way to say it because I feel like in American English we don't say it correctly. So I will try to say it correctly.
Okay, I've now saved it with a description. The description is very short. It says, we talk about George Eliot's novel, Daniel Deronda, and its influence on Zionism, also about Canaanism.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so could you refresh and see that description?
Let me look and see. Yeah, I do see the description. What I shared on Facebook, it's just the title, but I think that's okay because people can still click on the video. Right,
that's true. And let me see if I can share this on my on my main channel in the community tab.
Okay.
See that.
I'll also share this on like the blog page I do. And what I've been doing when I've been having a chance is I'm trying to do like these short blog posts where I'm not really talking, like I'm not writing text in the blog, but I'm like saying, watch this. So, like it's another way to me. I mean, I don't know if that helps viewership at all. I would like to think it might.
Well, it might. It's a backlink. That's all it is, really.
Yeah, it's probably not going to do a lot. It's interesting on that blog, like the two things though, actually, because I linked to something on this one community forum that I'm not really keen on, but it's starting to get traffic because I linked to something there, which is fine. But I'm just, every time I look at that forum, it's like any group, basically. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I joined a long hair group just so that occasionally when I draw a person with long hair, I can put it there.
Well, see, that's my plan. I actually do want to start. I was going to, okay. I don't know if I should say what I wanted to draw because I haven't started it yet. And I feel like if I haven't started it, I shouldn't say I want to do that. I should just share it once I do it. So I did plan on drawing something long hair related, but I'm not going to mention that until I start.
Okay. Okay. Well, Summer seems to want to be in on the discussion of Daniel Deronda because obviously he's interested in books by George Eliot, and he's also interested in the roots of Zionism. So I'm going to now fess up. Okay, he's going away because I'm going to make a confession. I have not actually read Daniel Deronda, and I'm not a George Eliot fan. But my father, during the last couple of years of his life, did become a George Eliot fan. It kind of amazed me. And he started reading Daniel Deronda while he was working on his last book about Israel, The Two Halves of the Nation. And so that intrigues me, and I want to find out more about Daniel Deronda by George Eliot, because before he told me that, I had no idea that George Eliot had anything to do with Zionism.
I think I may have heard that, but I don't know. You know, a lot of people were involved in Zionism. The one person that I never really understood, he wasn't of like any sort of background. It was Charles Taze Russell, and he seemed very obsessed with Zionism. And he was the founder of the Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't really understand why he was, but that was kind of interesting.
Well, I guess some people were waiting for the chosen people to go back to their country because there are a lot of prophecies about that. So, you know, there are religious people, but I don't believe that George Eliot was religious at all. So
no, I don't think he was. I think he's more just approaching things.
George Eliot.
I'm so sorry. I always thought he was
okay, George. Here, let me share with you what I know about George Eliot. I'm not, you know, one of those people who studied English literature or anything like that, but she was a woman, and she was, for a long time, she was kind of like an old maid, and nobody wanted her. And she wrote, and she was very sensitive. And then she met someone, and he happened to be married, and he didn't divorce his wife, but they lived together. Okay. And she called herself George Eliot because she wanted her books to sell. And at that time, if you were a man, that helped. So she pretended to be a man. She gave herself a man's name. But she was not a man. She was definitely a woman. And she wrote these 19th century novels. I believe The Mill on the Floss is one of them, which I tried to read. She was really, really sentimental, at least to my taste. But why don't you share with us what the Wikipedia will tell?
Oh yeah, let me do that. Definitely. So I can't believe I didn't realize George Eliot was a woman. But to my credit, I haven't really read George Eliot, so sorry.
Well, you know, she's not my favorite. I'll just admit that. But a lot of people really like her.
No, I've heard, yeah, and here's a picture that, yeah, definitely a woman. I will share the Wikipedia page. So let me just bring all that up.
I think her life is very interesting.
I think so too. So George Eliot, or Mary Ann Evans, I guess that was her
real name.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or was known as a pen name George Eliot. So although female authors were published under their own names during her lifetime, she wanted to escape the stereotype of women writing being very limited. I can kind of see that because maybe she wanted to write in certain genres I'm sure that they would not have considered her for. So that makes perfect sense.
And what's so funny is here, the Wikipedia article says that she's known for her realism. And I beg to differ. I read some of her, or tried to read some of her novels, the earlier ones, I guess, like The Mill on the Floss of Silas Marner. And they didn't seem realistic to me. They felt really sugary, really syrupy.
I see. I would have not. I mean, there was a lot of genre at that time.
I think that people's idea of realism has changed. At the time, if you wrote about ordinary people, like people who work, blue collar kind of workers and lower class kind of workers, then you were considered a realist. And if you wrote about princes and princesses and, the aristocracy, then you were considered not a realist. But that doesn't make any sense. I mean, in reality, we have all those different kinds of people, right?
Of course, yeah. I guess it was just what was in vogue at that time. And another thing too, like people think Oliver Twist is a cohesive novel, but if you read it, it's very clunky and it's all these chapters put together. It's because it was short serials published in the newspaper between 1834 and 1838. It wasn't a cohesive novel as would be published today.
Right. So it says here that she wanted to, Marianne Evans or George Eliot wanted to escape the stereotype of women's writing being limited to lighthearted romances. So she tried to tackle some other much more serious topics with psychological insight.
Mm-hmm.
But oh my gosh, she sounds like, to me, okay, she sounds like somebody steeped in the liberal idea of how you have to rescue poor people,
Oh, yes. And that, that doesn't always work. It's very patronizing, actually.
Yes, absolutely. So I was really turned off by what I did try to read of her when I was young. But now I'm going to tell you about my father. My father was doing research for his book about Canaanism, about the two halves of Israel, two halves of the nation, toward the end of his life. And he discovered that Daniel Deronda, which is a novel by George Eliot, and you can click on that. There's a link to Daniel Deronda in the Wikipedia article about George Eliot. So if you can click us over to that, that would be great. I mean, if you go right back up to her novel.
Oh, yeah, that's why I was trying to do search, like Control F, it takes me right to it. That's what I was trying to.
Yeah, okay. So we can go to Daniel Deronda. And do you want to read what it says about?
Sure. Daniel Deronda is a novel by George Eliot, first published in 1876. It was the last novel she completed and only one in a set of contemporary Victorian society of her day. The work's mixture of social satire and moral searching, along with sympathetic rendering of Jewish proto-Zionist ideas, has made her the controversial final statement of one of the most renowned Victorian novelists. Okay, that's interesting. What is that about, Aya?
Well, okay, so again, I admit I have not actually read this novel because I have a problem reading George Eliot, but as far as I understand, by talking to my father who did read this, it's Daniel Deronda is the main character, and he's Jewish and he's in Victorian England and he's looking for his place in life.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, by the end of the book, he becomes a Zionist and wants to go back to Israel.
Okay. So I guess like the proto-Zion, it's like the earlier forerunner of the Zion, like before it became more of a cohesive movement, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, actually, it was already a cohesive movement at that time.
Okay.
So if you look up Zionism in the Wikipedia, you can see what date the Zionists were.
Okay, let's do that. Because I mean, I've read briefly about Zionism, but I haven't researched it deeply. This would be interesting to see. Do you want to read this one for us, Aya, since you know a little bit more about Zionism, or?
Well, I mean, you can see that Theodor Herzl was considered the founder of Zionism.
Yeah.
And it says in his 1896 pamphlet, Der Judenstaat, he envisioned the founding of a future independent Jewish state during the 20th century. So that would be like 20 years after Daniel Deronda. He wrote Der Judenstaat. Okay, he wrote it in German, obviously.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. Well, that makes sense because many people from the Zionists were German.
Yes, but I think that before he wrote that, there were already people. So let's look at the history of that. I don't know. I was trying to get there.
Do you want me to go back up to the top? Here?
Yeah, no, I'm looking for the history part. I want to click on the history.
Oh, history. Okay, I see.
Okay, so well, 1922. Okay, so in 1922 there were 83,790 people of Jewish descent in Palestine. So obviously that's not when the first person arrived. They arrived in the 19th century.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I mean,
so yeah,
but they were originally from the Middle East. I guess just what I want to throw out there to everybody who doesn't believe this is that Jewish people or Zionist people had roots in the Middle East, because there are people that try to deny that now.
Yeah, I know. I mean, there were people who were always there and never left.
Of course, yeah, no, definitely. Like, I mean, you know, like Aleppo had a very strong Jewish community up until recently because of what's happening now. Tehran still does. Like, actually, you can't go out and preach your religion, but I don't think that Jewish people do that anyway. It's more towards the Christians. You can't go out and preach your religion, but they have a very diverse religious community in Tehran. They have Christians, they have Jews, Zoroastrians that predate Islam.
Right. So there was a Congress of the first Zionist Congress was held in Basel, Switzerland in 1897, which would be a year after that article about the Judenstaat. But I believe that there were people living there even before that.
Oh, so, of course. Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, if we can go back again to Daniel Deronda.
You want to go back to him? Okay, let's go back to Daniel.
Okay. So that's Zionism and then Daniel Deronda.
His well, this is interesting. His religious variety of Zionism supports Jews upholding their Jewish identity, defined as adherence to religious Judaism, opposes assimilation of Jews into other societies. And
where are you reading this, and who are you reading?
Here under right here. That's interesting.
This
I'm on the wrong.
Daniel
sorry, I'm sorry.
That was Herzl, and Herzl is very he's actually a very controversial person. He actually
on the wrong page.
Okay, let me tell you something about Herzl. Yeah, so Daniel Deronda is a fictional character. Theodor Herzl was a real person.
I clicked on the wrong thing.
Yeah, it's okay. But I do want to tell you that Herzl, before he considered Zionism, wanted to just convert to Catholicism.
Oh.
Get away from anti-Semitism that way, and it didn't work. And after he realized that that would not work, because of the because of a certain trial of somebody in France, because of that, he decided that instead he needed to found a place where people of Jewish descent could stop being the Jews and could start being regular people in their own country.
Yeah, not have to feel like they're always having to leave.
Yeah, and that was after the Dreyfus trial. Dreyfus was the name of the guy who was wrongly charged with treason or something like that in France. Okay, so back to Daniel Deronda. Do you want to read the plot summary for us?
Sure. Daniel Deronda contains two main strings of the plot, united by the character. The novel begins in late August 1865 with the meeting of Daniel Deronda and Gwendolyn Harris in a fictional town in Lebanon, Germany. Daniel finds himself attracted to but weary of the beautiful, stubborn, and selfish Gwendolyn, whom he sees losing all her winnings in the game of roulette. The next day, Gwendolyn receives a letter from her mother telling her that the family is financially ruined and asking her to come home. This is interesting. In despair at losing all her money, Gwendolyn pawns a necklace and debates gambling again to make her fortune. In a fateful movement, however, her necklace is returned to her by a porter, and she realizes that Daniel saw her pawn the necklace and redeemed it for her. From this point, the plot breaks off into two separate flashbacks, one which gives us the history of Gwendolyn Harris and the one of Daniel Deronda. Okay, that's interesting. That kind of sounds like Vanity Fair.
Well, okay, so the character of Gwendolyn is the girl that every person thinks that they either, a guy would want to marry or every girl would want to be.
Mhm.
And the little trick that George Eliot plays with that is we think we're going to be reading about Gwendolyn
Mhm.
and we think we're going to be identifying with her, but the story is really about Daniel Deronda.
It's like a plot twist, like in the middle or like a third of the way through. It sounds
Yeah,
like.
and by the end, Gwendolyn realizes she's not all that great. She's not this wonderful person. And Daniel Deronda gets a chance to be with her, but he chooses instead to a Jewish woman, and they decide to go to Palestine or something like that. Okay.
That's kind of interesting, huh? Okay.
Yeah. So I think in a way, Gwendolyn is the lure that George Eliot used to get ordinary people to read about Zionism.
Well, that's kind of clever because then you're like, I don't know, a third of the way or so through the book. I don't know how far that goes in, but I'm guessing it's a bit in. And then you're like, oh, well, I'm going to finish the story anyway because she might come back, but she doesn't. And then you're starting to read a different story.
Well, I mean, she's there till the end, and she just doesn't turn out to be as important as you thought she would be.
No, but what I guess what I'm trying to convey is like the pulp fiction type reader, they're going to want to hear about Gwendolyn, but now this new character comes up and they're presented with a little bit of a deeper topic than they may have anticipated, I guess.
Yeah, so yeah, that's the game that George Eliot plays. And look at the could you make it go back up so we can look at what the cover looked like?
Right here?
Yes.
Well, that's how covers of books used to be. They weren't flashy. They were either leather or just like a cloth bound. That's what a book was in its time.
Okay, so what do you think my reviewer, the one who thought pity about the cover, that was her title of the review of Theodosia and the Pirates. What if I'd had a cover like that?
I think nowadays people would complain about that because it's funny over time, like covers are becoming works of art. But the thing is, I like the cover of Theodosia and the Pirates. The thing about reviews like that is that person didn't specify what they didn't like about the cover, and they didn't specify what they like about the story, so I can't take that review seriously. But that's just my take.
And look, it's book one, so she probably published it in several volumes. Okay. And book one is called The Spoiled Child, and that's about Gwendolyn.
Yeah, so it's just like back then novels were published in like, well, I mean they are now, but I think it was broken up a bit more. And it wasn't always like a novel form. Sometimes it was just a serial in a newspaper, and then later it was published as a novel.
Right. So I think all of that is quite interesting. Yeah.
But do you want me to go back to the...
Yeah, so let's go back and let's see if there's a part that addresses the issue of Zionism in the novel, in her novel.
Oh, for sure. No, I'm freezing up. We're having lots of fun technical difficulties today. Okay, it's back. In the plot right here. I went too far. Just trying to see if in the plot it mentions it. Okay, as I'm looking through the plot, the discussion of the plot, they're not mentioning Zionism, because what you can do is you can do Control F, and it lets you search for a word, and it's in different, like they describe it in different parts, like the influence of Jewish Zionism under literary significance. That's where they're talking about it. Right here. Yeah. On its publication, Daniel Deronda was immediately translated into German and Dutch and was given an enthusiastic extended review by the Austrian Zionist rabbi and scholar David Kaufman. Further translations followed into French. It's cutting me off here. Okay. French, Italian, Hebrew, Yiddish, and Russian. Written during the time of Restorationism or Christian Zionism, it had strong following. And then it talks about other reactions, like depictions of Jews. I think this is interesting because remember, I didn't even think that they would compare it to Oliver Twist, but this is interesting. The depiction of Jews contrasted strongly with those of novels such as Oliver Twist, because yes, there were some characters that I would say were villainized just because of like the religious group they belonged to, but it shouldn't have mattered. Like there were a lot of rough characters, like, but yeah, that was true about Oliver Twist. And
okay, I think what I find interesting is that the novel has been cited by Henrietta Sold, Eliezer Ben Yehuda, and Emma Lazarus as having been influential in their decision to become Zionists. So that is interesting.
Okay, so that's interesting, right? Huh.
Yeah, so basically you can help to found a movement and not actually be part of that movement just by writing about it in a novel.
Yeah, no, definitely, of course. So maybe maybe someday, you never know, like somebody might read your book and there'll be an idea in there, or you never know.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I think we can exit the Wikipedia now and just talk to each other.
Yeah, I just took us out of there.
Yeah. So first of all, it used to be possible that somebody like George Eliot, while hiding her face from a lot of people didn't know that she was a woman, could publish a novel, and she didn't even have to commission anyone to paint the cover of the novel and then have the novel be judged based on the painting.
But like I said, that's the change in literature. It's going more towards the flashy right now, because that's how they drive a book sale, is like, oh, how does this appeal to the public? And sometimes they can get somebody to start reading a book that way, as opposed to how George Eliot had to lure them in with the story of Gwendolyn, like through a literary device, as opposed to like, oh, here's even though I love pretty book covers, but it was just a different era in publishing.
Yeah, it definitely was. But I wonder what my critic from the Historical Novel Society in England would have said if George Eliot had submitted her book.
I don't know. What could they say? That it was plain.
Yeah. Pity about the cover. We cannot possibly review this because your cover isn't good enough.
I know, but back then everybody's cover was either leather or cloth bound, and that.
Yeah, no, the thing is that the lady who said pity about the cover when it was this cover, when I submitted this to her, she said she couldn't possibly review it because the cover was too terrible.
I don't really, okay, that's great that they do book reviews, but just because they are a book review society, I don't really know if I agree with their criteria, because she didn't say anything about why she didn't specifically agree with the cover. She just said she just had this blanket opinion about the cover. If you can give me a specific reason why you don't like the cover, like you say, oh, I don't think it goes with this genre, then maybe I could give some credence to that review, but I can't give credence to a review that's generic.
Right, but I mean, and they also explained why they do this. They say, look, if you're reviewing any other product, say you're buying something like a refrigerator or a desk or something like that from Amazon, you would review it if there was something wrong with the outside of it. So we're also going to review the outside of a book.
But you need to be specific, like, okay, if I'm going to go shopping for a fridge at Lowe's, I'm not just going to say, I don't like the fridge. I'm going to say, okay, I have a smaller house and this fridge is like too many inches that it won't fit into this. Like, I'm going to be specific about why this product doesn't work for me. I'm not just going to say bad fridge. Because, you know, I gave you, here's another example. I read a book about the ketogenic diet. I don't really follow that diet. I'm not interested. Like you and Amber, you probably would like this book. But to me, it doesn't make any sense because I don't eat that way. So like I like vegan keto, but I don't really care for the recipes in there. So if I went to that book's review page and I wrote bad book, recipes suck, like what am I saying? Like I'm not giving a reason why I don't like the book, you know? Like you kind of have to specify.
Yeah. But again, and if you were reviewing this based on the cover, you could say the cover fell apart. I don't feel the cover was strong enough and the book fell apart. That's not a review of the book. It's a review of the product.
That's a review of the.
Yeah.
That's fine.
But there's nothing wrong with the spine of this book. It doesn't fall apart.
No.
It's just they didn't like the cover.
You know, that's another thing I don't really like about the Amazon reviews. I don't care if you come from, I guess, a group of people that review books for a living, or you're just an end user that bought the product on Amazon. They said you're supposed to review the contents of the book. You're not supposed to be describing like the condition that the product arrived in. It says that on Amazon's page. It says if you have, like if something's damaged, you're supposed to contact the person that published the book and tell them it was damaged and they can send you a different copy. You don't write it in the review there because it doesn't do anything. It's like you're just talking to the public and they're confused. Like because I read book reviews many times and people are like, oh, blah, 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 blah. But that doesn't, like, okay, with a dress, it might make a bit more sense. But with a book, like some of the people on there, they ordered the book on Kindle. And if you write that, they're going to be like, what?
Right, exactly. Yeah. So in the case of a book, the content is what you should be reviewing, not the package it came in.
Yeah, a little bit. So I mean, okay, I get it. You need an artistic like picture to lure people in, but I'm on the other school of like, those are pretty, but there's been a few times those tricked me into reading books that I completely didn't like at all. So I can't say a beautiful cover means a good book. Or like a cover I love will mean a good book, you know?
Right. So anyway, the idea of returning to your ancient culture is what the idea of Zionism was. Mm-hmm. And people they kind of don't remember that anymore. But the idea was that you remember where you came from and you go back to that and you embrace the culture that was there at that time. Mm-hmm. Not that you come from Europe and you bring your European culture with you, but that you say, okay, we were in Europe, we spent a lot of time there, we weren't assimilated completely and we weren't accepted, and we're going to go back to where we came from, where we can be who we are.
Yeah, that's supposed to be the point, right?
Right. And of course, there were people who were already there because they never left. And of course, you want to be accepted among those people. You want to accept them so that you can build a coalition and the ancient culture can continue to flourish.
You know, that kind of was how it was, though, in the beginning before, I think, I don't know, before the British got involved, because I think like a lot of the local people, like they're like some of them actually kind of got, I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know. Like, you know, the history about this more specifically than me, but I don't know if British mandates helped that. I don't know.
Well, look, when the Ottoman Empire was in charge of the region, they let people do their own thing, basically, as long as they didn't just, they had to pay the taxes to the Ottoman Empire. They couldn't rebel against them. But in terms of running their own towns and villages and having their own religion and all that, they didn't care.
Yeah, I mean, that's the general impression I have had of it anyway. But
yeah, I'm not saying that the Ottoman Empire was perfect or anything like that. I know that you had to get like a permit before you could build a house, and they had very specific regulations about that.
Yeah, they were very specific about things like that, but I guess most larger nation states are to some degree. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it was an empire. It was not really a nation.
Yeah, it was more than a nation state. Definitely, it's an actual empire.
It was an empire, and it was like all empires. I'm not saying I'm crazy about empires. So
no, I'm not either. I mean, but I think they were a little bit better than the Romans overall.
Yeah, they might have been. Anyway, and then the British took over. And the British were actually trying to suppress Zionism. They were.
See, what is up with that? Like, these European powers come in and they do, like, what? Okay, people left Europe so they could have more autonomy, and then they're coming in and they're like wanting to suppress something that really shouldn't have anything to do with them.
Well, they limited the number of people who could enter the country in order to found Zionist settlements. And so a lot of people had to enter illegally, or so for instance, my maternal grandmother, she came for a kind of like an Olympic event. It was called the Maccabiada. So it was kind of an athletic competition. She said she was coming in just for that, then she would leave. Of course, she never left, and she married my grandfather, who was already there. And this is all prior to World War II. All of this happened, and my mother was born in Israel. I mean, in Palestine. And it was still called Palestine. It was under the British. But yeah, my grandmother entered she stayed illegally.
Yeah, but people just didn't have a choice in the matter because of some laws that were passed. They're probably not fair.
Right. And my other grandparents, they were waiting for the legal permits that would allow them to come. They knew they were Zionists. They spoke Hebrew in the home, which is not something Jewish people did. Only Zionists did that.
Only Zionists did this, and this was more like,
they
educated.
Yeah, no, and they wanted to leave Europe and set up their own country, in the ancient Israel. But they were very law-abiding people. They were both university graduates, and my grandfather was a professor, and they just liked to have all the papers signed correctly. And he was waiting for a position and all of that. And then in 1939, he was still in Poland. They were still in Poland. World War II broke up, and then they had to, they had to leave the country illegally because the Nazis were on one side and the Russians were on the other side, and they left, and the movement helped them.
Yeah. No, for sure. But I feel like this is something that we don't really talk about anymore. Like, I feel like there's a lot of hatred for Zionism, but people don't realize, like, Europe was trying to annihilate European countries, stood by as this happened, and what were they going to do?
Well, that was during World War II, but the Zionist movement started in the 19th century.
It did, but what I'm trying to say is, like, people did have issues where they had to leave Europe in previous years.
They look, there are basically two choices in every situation. And it's either you completely assimilate and lose yourself in the local population so that nobody, even your own grandchildren, can even remember where you came from. And a lot of people did that. But if you couldn't lose yourself completely and become, bland like everybody else, then the other possibility is just going home, because you don't want to be a minority that gets picked on.
No, nobody wants that. I don't think anybody wants.
Right. So that was the choice that they embraced. And that choice was not to become a Jewish state, really, even though that was, the Judenstaat thing. It sounds awful. They calling it a Jewish state is confusing.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it's confusing is because you think of Jewish people as that minority in Europe that are called Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what they wanted to, if they'd call themselves a Judean state, that would be better than a Jewish state,
Because that's more religious based, like Jewish state, Judean state. No, not really.
Not religious. It's Judean is just, okay, that's a tribe.
That's a tribe, but saying Jewish sounds more religious is what I.
Yeah, it sounds religious. It sounds diasporatic, which means people who were refugees were called that.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't sound like what the local people would call themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what Zionism was about was rebuilding local Israel. The way it used to be before they were conquered and before the aristocracy got driven away, while the regular people got converted to all sorts of other religions.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
So everybody who was still in Palestine, in Israel, they're all descendants of Judeans. Okay, all of them are.
Well, yeah, I would say so, right? Like, right?
Yeah, and everybody in the region, the entire Levantine region, they're all Canaanites.
Oh, of course. And I told you about those people that were like, I don't know, fourth cousins, and they had that last name Dodd, and you were saying that seemed like an Israelite tribe name. Like, didn't I tell you about that?
Yeah, I think you did. God is
and that's more like, I don't know like exactly how I'm related to them, but apparently that was their last name, which I thought was interesting.
Right. So one of the things that people don't realize is the Old Testament has been doctored just a little, not a lot, but a little, to make it seem like the people who live in the land are always not the right people, and the people who are coming back from any kind of diaspora. And there were lots of diasporas. Every time something bad happened, all the rich people left the country, whether it was they went to Egypt or they went to Babylon or, and then when things got better, they would come back, and they always thought they were better than the people who stayed, but they were actually the same people, they weren't different people. It was just a class issue.
Yeah, it's just like the conflict of who left, who came back.
Yeah, so but they're all the same people. So I am very happy to see now that there are people in Lebanon who realize that they have been conquered by the Arabs, and they don't want the Arab identity. They want something better than that.
No, they do. Yeah, I think it's been around farther than I thought, because I was kind of looking into it, and I think the Maronite people have always kind of felt that way for at least about 100 years. From what I gather, anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm sure they always felt that way, but it might have been on sectarian religious grounds because they were Christians and the others were Muslims.
Yeah.
But I think now there's an understanding that there's another deeper issue, and it's not just about which Abrahamic religion you're
No, it's not at all. They're all like, they all have a Canaanite background. Like, that's what the DNA studies are showing. Everybody, it's the same, really. Different people just decided to follow different paths, and that's what that was about.
But there is a basic underlying culture that was common to that entire region, and it would be wonderful to revive it and stop being hateful to one another, don't you think?
Well, that's what I'm all about. Like, I'm interested in Canaanite. I would say Canaanite, but it sounds like it's Canaanite. Like, how do you say it, Aya?
Canaanite.
Canaanite. I will try. I just can't. I'm used to English American pronunciation. But yeah, I'm more interested in that and the Phoenicians and all this like geopolitical squabbling. And I think a lot of people in Lebanon have been for a while. It's just now more out in the open that they're sick of these people who come in from like Egypt, like Yasser Arafat, who wasn't even Lebanese, by the way, and he influenced like that. He was one of the people that influenced that civil war. And they're like, we don't want this anymore. We actually want to get along. Like, we want to celebrate being different, but all neighbors, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, as you know, my big dream is that on our show, and I don't care on which channel, I really don't, that we could host Nassim Taleb and talk to him about this.
Well, yeah, he can definitely, he has a lot of ideas. I was kind of reading his page, but he hasn't updated anything on there for about 7 weeks on Facebook.
On Facebook, okay. Well, he's been publishing probability papers.
Oh, he's busy. Like, he doesn't write much anyway. I know he said that he would prefer people read his books.
Well, I've been following him on Academia, whatever that thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he's writing some very interesting probability papers that show how all the people who are doing the statistics that is running all of our, really all the stuff that pretends to be scientific, uses statistics, and all they're doing is they're cutting off the tail, the outliers, and then they're claiming that the stuff in the middle, that's it.
Yeah.
And so it's all fake.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I think sometimes maybe people have an inkling about that, but he's brave enough to say it out loud.
Yeah. So I think he's brave on a number of levels. I admit that just as I admit that I didn't really read Daniel Deronda, but I'm interested. I'll admit that I don't really know enough mathematics to understand the nitty gritty of his papers, but I'm still trying to read them anyway.
Do you know what I really like about Nassim Taleb is that he's friends with people in Israel, he's friends with people in Lebanon, in Syria. He's friends with like people that are educated and they're not looking for these divisive factions. Like, he just wants to find like common, I don't know, Canaanite roots or whatnot, I guess.
Yeah, and what I love about him is he's very funny the way he states things. But one of the speeches he gave, he says, we should be able to self-identify as whatever we want to be. He said, if I self-identify as a Martian, you could question that and say, well, there's no evidence that your ancestors are from Mars. But if I self-identify as a Phoenician and I have genetic proof of it, who are you to say that I'm not a Phoenician?
Nobody's to say that, but I think anybody from that area has Phoenician Canaanite roots. Like, it's pretty common sense to me. It's people who came later that are not the original people,
right?
Yeah, the language.
I mean, here all these people in Europe are self-identifying as all sorts of genders that never existed before and all this, and so he's using that kind of
it's kind of like a satire.
Hey, how about I can self-identify as a Phoenician?
You could if you want. Like, that's so interesting. I've heard that people are many different things. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, no, I think we should get to identify what we are. I don't think somebody should stamp our passport and say what we are. We should get to decide.
Well, yeah, I think you should be able to. Now, I haven't had a U.S. passport in a while. I need to update mine. But I think with the U.S. passport, do you have to still put your like ethnicity or nationality? Because
no. All you have is your citizenship.
That's what I thought. But in some other countries, is this true? Like, I think
some other countries, you have an identity card that you have to show within the country, and it tells you what your ethnicity or religion is. And Israel is one of those countries. I don't have an identity card because I don't really live in Israel. I
Mhm.
do have an Israeli passport, and that just says I'm Israeli.
Okay. I think same with Lebanon, maybe, but I'd have to look. I know like Pakistan and some other countries definitely, because there were some people, they were transgender and they're not allowed to have an identity card, so they can't work. Like they weren't allowed to
Okay.
legally
Yeah, I
work.
don't even want to go there. It's
I won't.
yeah, I just yeah. But we can talk to Amanda about this,
Okay, that's
have
fine.
her on.
It was just kind of an interesting documentary. I'm not even saying like an opinion. I just thought it was strange that you're not allowed to legally work in the country when you're a person. That's it.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of these things, the documentation that you're required to have is part of the tyranny. But I don't really want to get into the whole transgender
No,
stuff.
no, 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 no. I just mentioned it because it just popped into my mind. That's it.
Yeah, but I think we should have Amanda on my main channel
Hmm.
sometime and ask her what's going on in Britain.
Hmm.
Uh,
That would be interesting. It feels kind of like we heard a lot of things and then it just kind of simmered down. But maybe that's the British attitude as well, because Amanda expressed that she wanted some calm months, whereas Americans seem to always want like this real boisterous news cycle. It just seems like a different mindset.
well, I mean, the last thing I heard about the British is that one of their little princes doesn't want to be prince anymore.
Oh, oh
But
my gosh. Now, is it okay if we talk about that for just a brief moment?
okay.
I won't if you don't want to, but
No, it's okay. Just go ahead and share what you
well,
think.
I was gonna say is I don't really understand like why when you know that you're in the public eye, like what is the all I was gonna say is I don't think you have a problem. I think it's kind of fluffy. Like that's it.
Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that shows up, in the National Enquirer,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. So I usually I hear about it. I'm not going to close my eyes completely. I just
Hmm.
don't have a really strong opinion about it one way or another because I'm not one of those people
No, I don't have a
who
strong
follows
opinion
the
either. I almost felt like okay, I almost felt like it was just another one of those stories to I don't know, give them publicity almost. Like they're saying they don't want publicity, but I felt like that story did the opposite of what, it was kind of ironic.
right. I'll tell you what royal family I'm kind of interested in, and I'll tell you why.
Hmm.
I'm kind of looking at the Romanovs, the princesses,
Hmm.
Anastasia. And the only reason I'm looking at them is because they had pretty hair and I want to paint one of them, or
Oh, you
maybe all of
should.
them.
Yeah, that would be really pretty actually. I totally support you in that.
Yeah, so I was just looking for subjects and I realized if I took a celebrity from nowadays and I tried to paint them, somebody would say, "You were looking at a photograph, weren't you?" And it's in copyright. So if I go far enough back, though, it's out of copyright and it's okay for me to paint them.
There's also an Austrian princess. She had very beautiful hair. I'm trying to remember her name, but she would maybe be an interesting person to paint as well.
Yeah, well, there are all sorts of possibilities, aren't there?
Yeah, so I think that would be pretty neat. Like I would love to hear more about your painting.
Yeah, well, I mean, these are just plans for
Hmm.
later on in the year. It doesn't have to happen this week, next week,
Hmm.
next month. It's just a possibility of my doing that just to work on my skills.
Hmm. For sure.
But
So
anyway,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, thanks for helping me find out more about Daniel Deronda.
Hmm.
Do we have any comments?
Let me go back and check. So I'm just gonna hit and see. I see that we had one person watching. Let me just see if anybody commented. I don't see any comments right now in the live feed, but perhaps after this has rendered, some people can leave comments about the book if they read the book and Zionism. That might be interesting.
Yes, and there might be some George Eliot fans who have their own things to contribute about George Eliot. Okay, well, I think we've pretty much covered it all. Don't you think so, Julia?
I think so too. Like, it was very interesting. I had not heard of this book before, so thanks for sharing. And I didn't really know much about George Eliot, so that was quite enlightening.
Okay, and I enjoyed talking to you about the Canaanism and the Phoenicians and
Mhm.
our common heritage.
Yes, exactly. And at the end of the day, like, let's maybe look for solutions beyond what certain political movements. You know what I'm saying? Just more
Yeah, yeah,
like,
we can find unity
yeah,
rather than break into small, tiny factions.
yeah, exactly. So it's a very interesting.
Okay, so I will say goodbye now, and we will talk again very soon.
Bye. I have a nice afternoon.
You too, Julia.